Welcome to the BXG podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet at the nexus of the universe and are melded as seamlessly as fungus and bird poop. I am one of your hosts, the Alpha Donut guy, Brendan Beswick, alongside my co-host, a man who's known for his grandstanding, hot dogging, and prima donna attitude, Gregory T. Filson. Greg, having a hard time holding it in there, buddy.
Indeed, I am. Just it's funny because just finished watching The Northman a couple days ago too, which is all in that aspect for the beyond for the Patreon people out there that want to listen.
Right. For our patrons.
Our Patreon patrons.
I only wish this was just like mead.
Have you ever had mead?
No, I haven't.
It's made out of honey. It's very sweet. What's funny is everyone always drinks mead out of like a massive vessel.
Right.
It's for the most part. I mean, you can have a mead that's less sweet, but it's not something to have out of like a mug. It's like it really should be a smaller thing because it's very sweet. But I guess then they didn't care.
What about a horn?
A horn is probably okay. I always feel like when they say mead, it was probably more of a beer-based beverage brewed with some honey. And then what we have translated it to in the last 500 years is more of a honey-based beverage more than an ale brewed with honey. Not to get into all that, but I have studied a little bit. Brett, I'm doing okay. I'm tired.
Good. I'm glad.
It's one of those things.
I didn't ask. I'm glad that you clarified.
Yeah. I'm tired. That's really all I have to say. I don't know why. I didn't do anything this weekend. It just
maybe that's
watch basketball. Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, I did a lot of schoolwork. I did probably too much schoolwork, but I didn't actually go out and do anything. I just did my morning stuff. And then I came in, and maybe I should have done more, but I was also just feeling lazy. So, yeah. How are you, Brendan?
I think I'm, I had the honeymoon period, and now I'm just kind of back to myself. So, a little dour.
Okay.
So, just because it's just who I am as a person.
Well, I feel like we all are like that. If you have a job where you like, and we've all had jobs where we just hate it. Day one, we're like, this sucks.
I don't hate this.
I shouldn't hate it. Not hate it, but what I should say is it's just not as good as we thought, or something to that realm. We've all had jobs where like day one, we're like, this is miserable, and I'm just going to get through it because I have to, because I need money. And then we've had jobs where like, oh, this is better than expected. I like this. And then you get back to the part where it's like, oh, it's not terrible, but it's still a job. And I have to go in. I had a post on Instagram where it was like, I have to go back to work tomorrow, but I was just there Friday. That doesn't really seem fair. And it's that idea of like, you don't really get away from it. And I'm trying to be better, at least for a week, of getting away from my job when I'm not there, because I was inundated with just a lot of stuff. Good, bad, and ugly. Some of the emails were very positive that I received outside of work, but some were just not negative necessarily, but just not something I needed to read at 9 o'clock at night. So, in your particular case, Brenton, what is happening other than just you being you? Anything in particular? Just you being you?
No, that's it. That's all.
That's fair.
It's just
that's good.
And it's not like bad or oh man, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's just
that's good.
I just I've said it before that I am content. Last week, maybe I was happy. I was happy with the
Yeah.
situation, but as I have argued, happiness isn't real as far as being
Well,
a state
right,
of things,
right. As a state.
as an ongoing state. It's more of a chemical reaction. And I mean that seriously, chemical, in the brain.
No. Well, sadness isn't real either.
No, it is.
Well,
It's very
in a
real.
sense, you can be depressed, but that's different
Yeah.
than being sad.
Is
Being
it?
sad and being depressed are different. Yeah, you can be clinically depressed, but you can be sad about, like, I can be sad about a team of mine losing, or I can be sad about something happening at work, but like to be actually depressed about something is actually real. You can be clinically euphoric, which is also bad. That's literally the idea of like manic depression.
Not to
Of
cut you off,
yeah,
but I don't know if I should wear my glasses because if I go like this, it makes it look like I have googly
ooh,
eyes.
that's crazy. It's kind of
Like
crazy looking.
googly.
Oh,
Oh,
there you go.
you thought I couldn't give a you googly?
Are you googly?
Anyway, so lots to get into. The Last of Us, The Mandalorian, the workplace, the work in
Work in
progress,
progress.
yeah. Which really we want. I would prefer
Oh, I
to
would too.
delve into listener, viewer, whatever situations because I always find them more funny.
Yeah, I do too. Well, because it's like we can only have so many things. I
I
will
can
also
have I
say,
can have a lot of things, but
well, what I should
I
say
can't
is
really
there's
talk
this.
about them.
Sure, and that's what I was going to say too. Is like we can only have so many things we can actually like talk about that are like, and ours can only, So that's the thing. But if they go an outside influence, I will say the one that I'm going to bring up is something I've heard from other people all in the way. So mine is just a continuation of that. It's not. It's just something that finally happened to me that I never had happen to me at literally any other job.
That's what she said.
So, if I can go in, I'll just do it. I guess I'll just do it.
That's what she said.
So I started my job November 1st, 2021, the current job I have. And I parked in this exact same parking space that day, every day for almost a year. Almost a year. And it was a little bit before Halloween, this person, now I work at the Catholic school and there's a church there. And a couple days before Halloween, someone parked in my spot. And it's not like it's a close spot. I actually parked farther away than any other teacher because it's just that thing where I was like, okay, I'm just going to park here. No one will ever take this spot. But I like this spot because when it's hot out, it like the way this, it sounds very weird, but when it's hot out, the sun hits it in a way that the car doesn't get that hot. So I can go out there in my lunch break and put my window down and it's comfortable. And then when it's cool, the sun hits it in a certain way, the times of the year where my car is warm enough that it's comfortable. So I really like that spot. I didn't do that intentionally. It just worked out that way. But then someone parked in that spot that I'm confident is at the church. And I get to work about 7:25 in the morning. And that person's always there 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Does not matter. I got there today a little early because I didn't have to take Janie in the school. And someone is still there. And my thing is now, there's nothing I can do, right? There's nothing I can do at this point. I can't take away. Now I park in a worse spot. I'm under a tree, bird shit on my car. I sent you a picture of it at one point. And it's the only other spot I have because you don't want to park right beside someone. But I also don't want to park a million miles away from where I work. My thing that I think I should have done is I should have done a Joker-esque letter where I collaged a message saying, get out of my parking spot. But now it's too far gone. And my question to you and to our listeners / viewers is, what is another route I could have gone? Because that's a psychopath move because I literally named one of the main psychopaths of our fictional time. What is a move I could have done also at this? Because I have two other options I think I could have done, but that is the most psychotic one, is actually to take a letter, cutting things out of a magazine and put it on there, get out of my spot. And I've heard other people that same thing where they parked in a certain spot for a really long time and then out of nowhere someone takes their spot and there's nothing you can do about it.
So I guess follow-up question.
Yes.
Is your name on the spot?
My name is not on my spot. That was another thing, right?
Not your spot.
It is not technically my spot, right?
Right.
But my car had been there every single day. And this is someone, an outsider. And I also, my car is very, like, it's very distinguishable. It's a gray Volvo with a Grateful Dead license plate thing around it, and like other little markings that would make it seem like this person is, that's where they park their car every day. I'm also far enough away from the school that it's like, and the church, that like their parking spot doesn't take, like, it doesn't make them any closer to it. They could have actually had a better parking spot. And that's what's annoying to me too. If they're at the church, which I think they are because I don't recognize the car from any of my coworkers, why did they take this particular spot?
So my advice to you would be to one of two things. Okay.
Yes.
Get there earlier.
That was my number one. Get there at like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And
or
just, yeah.
Or just move on. Because like I told you when you texted me,
Yeah.
you know, life's short. We're all gonna die soon.
Yeah.
And I want to
Relatively
minimize
speaking.
the time that I have to spend with Jen from HR.
Yeah.
And get living while
is,
the living's good.
and this is the thing that I would love to move on from this, but I have a lot of good things, but one thing that I am bad at is I am petty as hell.
Neurotic. Oh.
And I am also neurotic, but I am also Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers when it comes to stuff like this. And the reason why I am mad about this is not just because of that particular thing where like my car is recognizable, and this person just didn't know. They were there earlier than I was. There was 2 days during December where that person got there later than I was. So I parked in that spot.
And you
then
know what they thought? Who's this asshole?
Yeah. And they literally parked right fucking beside my car.
Well, yeah, because that's their spot.
And I'm like, what is this fucking move? It's a little tenant. And now I just, honestly, I don't care anymore about the spot. Although I think about it every day when I pull in. I would actually argue my spot's probably actually better now, but it's the principle of the matter. I just want to know who the person is. That's like the biggest thing, because they go there, they're there before I am, and they're gone before I am out of teaching. And I got out a little earlier today, so I was looking around the parking lot, and that car was gone. So I can't figure it out. It bugs me, and I just want to know. I'm not going to approach this person. I don't care that much about, but I do care enough just to be like, what kind of cojones does this like 80-year-old man that just wants to go to mass at 6:30 in the morning have to like out of nowhere take this spot? And the thing is I know this person's a local because he has a license plate ring, or she has a license plate ring
Holder?
that is I call him a ring holder, whatever you want to call it. That is a Santa Barbara car dealership that is out of business. So this person's been around. It's not like
So,
it's been out of business for like 20 years, but it's still been out of business before I moved here.
so
Not that I looked it up or anything.
I don't know who they are, but I know who you are.
I'm an escaped lunatic, and I like murdering little fat kids like you.
I've never murdered a little fat kid.
That we know of.
I was a little fat kid.
Well, you murdered him.
I did murder that kid. Yeah, I did murder that kid. Anyhow, I've heard other people have this happen. This happened at my bank job where someone just started randomly taking my friend's spot, and she was so mad. And it was the same reaction that you had, where it's like we can't figure it. We like try to like figure out who it was, and we never did. At least in the time that I worked at the bank. So, yeah, I mean that's it. It's one of those weird workplace things that you just can never solve, and there's no real solution to. But it will bug me a little bit every single day.
My weird work things are who took my spot. They're like, who spread feces all over the bathroom wall,
I had that happen at a different job, but
or who shit in their hand. I'll tell you one. Actually, I'll give you one. So this is a prior job, and I walked to the bathroom. I said I need to use the restroom, and there's no restroom in the office. It's in an office building, so you have to use the restroom that is just on the third floor or whatever floor. And I walk in, and I'm like, wow, somebody blew this bad boy up because it smells like shit. And then I look down on the ground, and lo and behold, there was in fact shit in the middle of the floor. And this wasn't a situation where it was like, I'm rushing and it started coming out before I hit the toilet. Because it was in the middle of the floor. It's not in your stall.
mm.
And believe me, I'm no forensic kind of analytical detective. I'm not out here looking at blood.
Not full time.
I'm not out here looking at blood splatters to determine who the serial killer is. I am not that kind of person. But
CSI Grove City.
based upon how it looked and the splatter, it sure looked like someone shit in their hand and then just threw it on the floor. And so then the question becomes, who would do such a thing? And the only thing that we could determine was it was obviously a dissatisfied customer, which is, interesting in its own right, based on why a customer from this business would be dissatisfied. But I'm not going to get into that. But I said to my supervisor, hey, there's shit on the floor. To which she said, what do you mean? And I said, I went into the bathroom and someone shit in their hand and spiked it like a touchdown on the floor. And she said, well, I will call the maintenance guy, whose name I cannot remember, but we'll just go ahead and call him Ron because it seems like a maintenance guy name. And
I said Gary, but
so
yeah.
she got a hold of Ron 8:30 in the morning. I left 5:30 at night. Now, not only was there still shit on the floor, but because people don't pay attention, there's also shit footprints leading up and down the hallway. It's like, oh, I stepped in shit. And it's not like I stepped in shit, but really it was just bubble gum. It was like, oh, I actually stepped in human feces. So
Ooh.
So with all that shit talking behind us, time to talk about The Last of Us, episode 8, the penultimate episode. I actually have notes this time, but naturally I didn't have them pulled up. I did not have them. Okay. The Last of Us, episode 8, the penultimate episode, titled When We Are in Need. When We Are in Need. And this introduces us to a couple other characters. David, who is played by Scott Shepherd, known for Bridge of Spies, X-Men Dark Phoenix, and James, who is played by Troy Baker, who is known for being the voice of Joel in the game and also played kind of a smaller role in the Lonesome Dove sequel miniseries Comanche Moon. This episode was written by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, directed by Ali Abbasi, who is also directing the season finale. This was going to be difficult to talk about without spoilers, but a very, very intense episode. What did you, spoiler free, what were your thoughts on this episode of HBO's The Last of Us?
So I looked at this episode almost like a reverse roller coaster, where it took a little while to get going, and you could see it. The tension was building, and it was good. Like, I liked the tension. It wasn't anything negative. You could feel it building. And we know that Ellie's storyline means that she has a little, violence in her, but nothing we've really seen extreme. And she's trying to save Joel, and she's doing little things like that. And then it just goes up that massive hill, and you're just creaking, and then everything just happens. And I thought it was awesome. Like, I mean, I was raving to you about this. I couldn't even hold back. I was like, I should hold back a little bit, but I was like, no, I think it's the best episode of the season. I really do. I just thought the way they built it up, I thought the tension built really nice. The way that the villain was presented was really interesting, where he's kind of a trickster. I would say that he was, and I haven't read anything. I try to avoid things, so I want to talk fresh. But I felt like it was almost like a Satan-esque character, a trickster, trying to elude you with nice things, and then eventually presenting himself as the evil demonic character that he is, and then saying you can't get away, that kind of thing, which is that that correlation to Satan in the Bible. Trickster, a fallen person, and then here we go. So I thought it was excellent. Like I said, I thought it was an excellent episode. What I like most about it is that a lot of time penultimate episodes have an ending where you're like, this could have ended that season and I would have been fine. But there still was a little bit left to be desired with it, which I thought made it great. And so for me, like I said, best episode of the season. I thought it just did the justice of this. It was very violent, but not violent in a way that seemed wrong, just violent in a way that seemed that if any of us were living in a time like this, seemed accurate. And I don't know how that correlates to the game per se. I mean, I can guess, but it felt very real to the game, in the sense that video games can sometimes be more violent than portrayed, and things like that. But also, it just felt like the storyline was just perfect. So for me, best episode of the season. Can't wait for the finale. But I can't wait because I want it to be over.
Yeah. This was you said roller coaster. I think that this was very much a symphony of brutality. that just manages to crescendo at the exact right moment. There are some pretty robust changes from the game that we'll get into with spoilers. But I also felt like those, and has been the case with most of the things, is that have improved upon what was already a masterful story to begin with. Was the violence gratuitous? I think that's a question that a lot of people are probably asking today, as we record a day after the episode aired. Was the violence gratuitous? I don't think so. And the reason I say that is because, as you said, living in this world is kill or be killed, and
Right.
at any given moment, any of the times that Joel or Ellie or whomever kills another person, not just an infected, but another person, it's usually because it's you or me situation. And I think that it was necessary. I think that it was necessary to escalate the violence in this episode to show just how far Joel is willing to go to protect Ellie, and how far Ellie is willing to go to just survive, and subsequently also protect Joel and get back to Joel. And I really feel like there's a time in a lot of stories like this where you have these two characters and they're trying to save each other, get back to each other, or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, we'll do anything at all costs. What does that mean? And I think that in this case, with this story, in this world, it is, we are just going to tear through this town.
Right.
And, not to get mild spoilers, but in this section of the game, Ellie and Joel just lay waste to this entire resort between the two of them. And it's just, there's more gaminess to it, obviously being a game, but I think that they preserved that feeling or those moments. And it was very much down to a T, shot for shot, in a lot of ways. But I think that there's a lot of specific details to unpack with this, because the violence wasn't even just necessarily like the on-screen violence. It was the shadow of violence. And that is what made this episode scary too.
Right.
And I feel like overall, they have done a really masterful job of using the infected as, okay, these are the things that are scary about this world. These are the things that we're trying to avoid. But I think that they've done a really good job of using the concept of scarcity makes things even more terrifying. If we saw the infected in every single episode, like you do, like in The Walking Dead, you become like desensitized to it. But really what the scariest part about this is the world and the people in it, and the fact that they're
Right.
willing to go to any lengths. But that also, I think, when the threat of infected are nearby, it ratchets things up even more. So I thought, best episode of the season. There's been a lot of really good episodes.
Yeah, like you could pick a lot of episodes.
I think that realistically, every episode thus far has been no less than an 8 out of 10. with most being 9s or 10s.
sure,
But
yeah.
but with that being said, I think that we now will take a break and pay some bills, and then we'll get into spoilers. And this week, our segment, or well, I guess it's not a segment, but paying the bills,
Yeah, our ad
is brought to you. This was actually an ad taken out by the infected in The Last of Us. This is for toadstools, which is, of course, the fruiting body of a fungus. There has never been a precise definition as to what makes a fruiting body of a toadstool. And there's no clear distinction between toadstools and mushrooms. The classic image of a toadstool is that of a fruiting body with a stalk and a cap. And so the infected want you to know the difference between a toadstool and a mushroom because racism.
Sure, that makes sense.
So
use code BXG at your local toadstool website,
right,
for 20% off.
Yes. Or in the forest.
Yeah,
in your
20%
local
off.
forest.
Check your local. You'll get 20% off that free
Toadstool.
Careful,
some of them are poisonous. Spoilers. Now, I think the best way to get into this is that you text me during the episode and said that you were very interested to hear what some of the differences were between the episode and the game. So I'm just going to blow the doors off of it, right? And give you one of the biggest differences between the game and the show.
Joel's dead.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you
Okay.
blew it. I was gonna say something really dumb, but then you beat me to it. So
Can't outdone me, Breton.
what a distinction. So, I mean, how do you want to? What do you want to do here? How do you want to break this down? Do you have specific questions?
The biggest reason why I said this is this, and I mean this in both positive and negative, but mostly positive. This felt like a TV show more than it felt like a video game, and not like the other episodes necessarily felt like a video game, but I think anyone that played any sort of video game like this sees that kind of like the way things are put together. This felt like a TV show. Like this felt very much like, here is this plot point. Here's a lot of stuff that, like, if you're playing a video game, you would just get bored with. And I don't mean that negatively towards television, but in a video game, you would be like, I don't care about this stuff. TV show, it changes that moral compass, all those things in a 40-minute segment. If you're just kind of sitting through that, hitting, X or something on a PlayStation controller, would be, I think, to some degree boring because there wasn't a ton of action in those moments. But in this show, I thought it worked so perfectly well. I mean, Ellie, unbelievable. I mean, she's so good in this episode, it's ridiculous. But I think that was the biggest thing, was just that there's a lot of talking in this episode, and I don't know if maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that is what people are okay with in video games. But I felt like there was so much talking in this episode, and I love talking. But
so here's what I would say is that there were moments that are not in the game. And I think that the one nice thing about the show, and not just for this episode, but for a lot of the episodes, especially like the Kansas City episodes, you get an opportunity to see what the opposition's up to. And that's not really something that a whole lot of games will show you, unless it's like a moment where the character that you are controlling is like eavesdropping on like a conversation or whatever. So I think just to get a couple things right out of the way is the group that's kind of holed up at this resort town here in Silver Lake, I believe is what it's called, Colorado.
Yep.
And there are no with these characters. First of all, the character of James, played by Troy Baker, is, I would say that he's in the game as a pretty close facsimile to an unnamed character, basically. This character who kind of hangs out with David is seen throughout, but he's never really said like, oh, this is James. So they kind of just gave a name and a face to that kind of like whatever character. And I thought that it was cool to get Troy in there. Like I said, the voice of Joel in the game. I texted you that I thought that, I thought it went well for him. I'm curious to see whether it could potentially lead to more live action, because he is very much known as a voice actor, and Troy Baker has played some just straight up iconic characters over the years in video games. The only person to my knowledge that has ever played Batman and the Joker. He's been
so cool.
So there's that. There's no real religious overtones to this group in the game. They're just a group of survivors. They mention women and children. You never really see that in the game. Like, you never really see any other like children per se outside of Ellie and Sam. And so like they mention it, but you never really see them. So it's kind of up in the air whether that's even a thing or not. David's really creepy. He's creepy in the show. He's creepy in the game. I don't know that in the game, unless I'm just reading it way wrong, that there's any like pedo vibes from him in the game.
Sure.
Like I said, maybe, I mean, I've played it several times. I've never really read into it that way, but it was almost like they said, all right, let's list all the ways that we can make this guy just totally vile. Preacher, after the apocalypse, maybe he's a little bit of pedo and cannibal. And then Craig Mazin, the director or the producer of the series, was just like, you know what, fuck it, let's just use all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how we wind up with this David character versus the game version. But the conversations of the group with the group and like the sermons sort of deal are not included. Any type of conversational piece or verbal confrontation between Ellie and David, or Joel and these kind of side characters or these side enemies, are all straight out of the game. The difference is where this is just plot point to plot point to plot point. The game breaks it up with action sequences. So there's the scene where Ellie and David are sitting around the fire and they're kind of talking. And then they're in like a sawmill or like a warehouse sort of deal. I think it's a sawmill, and they get attacked by infected. And so you have to navigate that situation. And that's where he kind of learns that Ellie is like a badass and can hold her own. And then they have the conversation of things are meant to be. We sent these guys out, blah, 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 this wild man, and he had a kid with him, and he kind of connects those dots. And so they just kind of meld all that into one sort of conversation. The sequence where she rides the horse, like in the game, she gets away after the horse gets shot out from under her. And she kind of like escapes into the town, and she starts just fucking wrecking people. And then eventually she gets caught. She gets thrown in the cage, and they have all of those interactions that they had. The breaking of the finger, the biting, like the different back and forth. She realizes that they are cannibals. There's no sequence where like it's hinted at that a girl's just like eating her dad. Like that's kind of left out, and they don't really specifically say that, but they leave it kind of in the shadows, and it's inferred. And the scene in which Joel has the two guys and he says, "I'm gonna rip your fucking kneecap off," is right. It's right out of the game. And then when the guy said, "Yo, you don't have to do that, we'll tell you," and he's like, "It's okay, I believe him," and he just cracks that guy over the skull with a pipe.
So great.
Right out of the game. Right out of the game. The restaurant scene where it's burning down and she kind of sneaks up and goes ham on the cleaver, right out of the game. And so they did just such a wonderful job of recreating all of that. And I was telling Melissa, I was like, man, this was such a good episode. She's like, what? She's only seen the first episode so far. She's like, what makes it so good? I said, it's just intense. It's just, it just never lets up. It never
it's
lets
relentless
up moment. Yeah. And I think that despite the fact that they cut out those combat sequences or like the stealth sequences or, the infected, having to avoid the infected with Ellie and David, it retained its intensity just because of how intense all of those interactions are. And it was wonderfully acted by each one of the characters. And Bella Ramsey is a force. She's a force in this show. Or they are a force. She's a
I hate saying I normally hate the idea of saying force.
Yeah.
This is one of the few times where I think it actually literally works, where it's, Bella Ramsey is so good in this episode. I don't know how many people, and I mean any actress that could have done what Bella Ramsey did in that last 20 minutes. I really don't, because those scenes were like chilling. And I mean, full disclosure, I had to use the restroom, but I didn't want to pause it because I wanted to keep that momentum going with how well those scenes were moving. That like pausing it would have done it a disservice. I really do.
So you just pissed yourself, or
I just pissed myself. I just pissed myself right on the couch. You know what? It'll clean up, but that scene will live forever. No, I just held it and it hurt really bad, but I don't care because it was awesome. And sometimes you just gotta do it. Sometimes you gotta just power through James Cameron style.
Ooh. Go ahead and use the bathroom. You'll see it again. Fucking James Cameron. God, we'd gone a while without talking about him. You just made me upset all over again.
That's why I did it. But no, it was awesome. That was amazing. It showed because we are all Pedro Pascal people. And I mean all is that the King's Yaw, the King's Yin. Everyone likes Pedro Pascal, right?
That's not for Pedro, that's for you.
No, right. It's for me. He's one of the few people I think we all like.
Yeah, he seems to be pretty much universally,
And now it's putting this thing where Bella Ramsey is kind of making that edgeway, and like they can't be Pedro Pascal because he's also the fucking Mandalorian. I mean,
right.
And so there is that where he's literally in the two best TV shows that are happening at this exact moment. And yet, Bella Ramsey has these moments in this particular episode where you're like, oh, well, that's an Emmy.
Yeah, I don't know. And if anyone beats her, it's rigged. I
mean, I honestly say, like,
I hate to be
just
that
don't
way,
know
but
how. No. I agree with you, Brenton. As much as I like Succession, and as much as I'll be like, there's still shows down the road. What Bella Ramsey has done is what you're supposed to do as an actor, right? I mean,
yeah,
to leave you feeling a certain way, and if Bella Ramsey doesn't win, then there's something obviously behind it more than the actual craft. And I'm
right.
not someone we have to respect the craft. That episode was affecting, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
that,
and the thing is
because of Bella Ramsey. It literally is because of what Bella Ramsey did in this episode. It's yes, the ending is amazing when he grabs her and says, calls her baby girl, and it's just that's amazing, and that grabs you and it gives you chills. But it only really matters because Bella Ramsey is like young Joel. Like he sees that now. He sees that she can take care of herself in the way that he can take care, and it's great. I can't believe I'm saying this. Unless Succession is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I'm talking a top 5 season of television of all time that I've watched in my lifetime. Top 5 television. This is the show. Succession has such a hard thing, and it's HBO, and it can do it. I'm not saying it can't. This show is, like you said, what's the worst episode? 8?
Yeah.
Realistically, I mean, that might be selling it short. It really could be. Like, we might just be, being pedantic, but Succession is the only show left that we know of that is in the realm of doing something like this. And you don't watch Succession, and it's
Correct.
something. But I'll talk about it on here. But I really feel like it's one of those things where it's The Last of Us to lose something like this, and not that this ultimately matters, but it does matter.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that it's very easy to get caught up in everything in the moment. And so maybe a couple months, a couple years down the line, we look back at this and we say, well, it was really good, but maybe not as good as we thought in the moment. But I have a hard time thinking about what are perceived to be some of the greatest seasons of television and not including it in that pantheon at this time. And I know you had the very funny, or at least it was funny to me, conversation about how the best first season of television was the OC.
The OC.
What was the other one? Mad Men, maybe? I don't know.
I truly do believe that the first season of the OC is the best, and this is now in the running.
Oh,
we haven't got to the end.
Listen,
we haven't got to the end.
Stop it.
But I think the OC's first season is truly the best. The other thing I'll say with the OC is that is regular television. What do we call that now? It's like
it's like Netflix,
Fox, NBC,
network,
Fox,
network.
NBC, network. That's the word I was going to say.
Yeah,
it's the best first season of network television still in my mind. I still truly believe that.
I've seen. Well, that's in your mind. I've seen.
I'm saying that. I'm just.
Yeah,
it's a great season. It's a great season.
I feel like, and there's one episode to go, and I know how it ends, obviously, but
sure.
And we'll maybe get to your predictions with that here shortly, but I don't know how this doesn't. I don't know how this doesn't enter the pantheon of just best seasons of television. Period. I put it right there next to, Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, The Wire, Mad Men, any of
I
these
would think,
other, any of these other shows. It's just when you have episode after episode where we come on, and it's not just us. This isn't just us fanboying, right?
no,
Or,
we're not.
or me
We're
fanboying.
just, yeah. No.
It's everyone who's saying, "Oh my god, episode 6, those moments at the end with the house, best episode. Oh my god, the Left Behind episode, to see the emotion, best episode.
Yep.
Oh my god, this episode. Oh my god, the Bill episode." Like the Bill episode had everybody like knees jelly, and like where we've gone since then. I
That's
love
5
the
episodes ago.
I love the
Okay.
Henry and Sam episode, but and that's what I mean. It's like, how can you not objectively say this is one of the best seasons of television, and like say that with a straight face and mean it?
The only thing, and I'm not saying counter it, is that I do totally agree. I think a lot of times things that get lost in this shuffle are seasons of sitcoms.
Sure.
And I think that is something that people forget, because I will ultimately say the best actual season of television ever made is season 4 of Seinfeld. I should say
I don't
know what it would take.
Dramatic television.
Because that gets lost in the shuffle. I've seen these kind of rankings before, and then Seinfeld just falls and they always pick like Seinfeld season. It's not even season 4, which is essentially the best season of Seinfeld. I don't know what happens there. I challenge anyone to go back in season 4 of Seinfeld and not tell me that's not the best kind of thing, best season of television. But for dramatic television, I 100% agree with you, Brenton, that it's the first season of Mad Men. It's probably the 3rd season of Breaking Bad. I binged it, so I always get my seasons confused with Breaking Bad, but I think it's the 3rd season of Breaking Bad that's very, very good. And I have not watched all The Wire, and I have not watched all The Sopranos. We are going to do that this summer. And then there's Hill Street Blues. There's shows like that that get lost in the mix that are really, really good. But this is in the mix, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
And for sure. And I don't think anyone necessarily saw that coming. I think people thought this would be a good show, but to say that this would be a show that started 8 weeks ago and now is something where we're like, this is absolutely prestige television. I don't think people saw that coming. I don't think people saw that coming this way.
I knew that it would be very good because of who was in it, the fact that Neil Druckmann was so heavily involved, the fact that it was HBO. I wouldn't trust this to anyone other than HBO. I wouldn't trust this to Netflix. No. The Flix Funk, no thank you. I wouldn't trust this to Prime. I wouldn't trust this to Hulu. Like, it's in the exact correct hands. Did I think that we would be talking about it joining the pantheon of potentially best seasons of any show ever? No. I think that I would be, at any point, to say that with a first season of anything is foolish. To have those expectations coming in, but it has exceeded all of my wildest expectations, all of them. Yeah. And it's been a ride, and it's been impressive, and it's been for me a joy to share this with people who are not necessarily people who play video games and are able to like open and to experiencing the story, knowing that that's where it comes from, and have these conversations has been, honestly, like I said, it's honestly been like very special for me to be able to do that, because as I've said, your top lists shift, and folk, you know what I mean? They shift like moving sands. And I've always said Super Mario World is, in my opinion, the best game ever made. But this is this is, to me, the best modern game made. I think that once you get into sort of like the PS2 to PS3, the Xbox stuff, you kind of are looking at things through a different lens and a different, this is like modernity for video games, and you have like the retro stuff and everything. But I do believe that the original is the best modern game. And I've said this before, this game came out on PS3
right.
in 2013 and is still better than most of the things that have come since. I'm excited for the possibilities of where we go from here with adapting game stories into television. I think the television works the best. If they tried to do this in a movie, it wouldn't have worked.
No, I agree.
There's too much nuance. But it makes me excited. It makes me excited for Prime's take on God of War, and the fact that Cory Barlog, who kind of not the creator of Kratos and God of War, but the shepherd of the last two of the Norse saga, is going to be heavily involved. And it makes me excited for potentially some Horizon things, because these stories are so goddamn good. And people don't get to experience them because they go, oh, games, Madden,
Right.
Call of Duty, Fortnite. You know what I mean? But there's the same way that HBO is prestige television, Sony first party studios are prestige gaming. And they are story driven, narrative driven. You're going to experience stories that will move you the same way that a good TV show or a good movie or a good book will. And so I kind of have had this thought clanging around my head of like, okay, this is The Last of Us, but in many ways it's almost The First of Us, because there's going to be more to come. And if they're all even sniff the quality of this, they're all going to be really good. But with all that being said, next week is the finale. And so Joel's and Ellie's journey, one way or another, is going to conclude. And so what, I know you said I don't have any predictions, but if you really had to dig deep,
yeah.
What do you hypothesize may happen?
I think that we put a spot where Ellie is in peril. And it's an idea of like, she's almost there, whatever there is, and it's that thing where it's like, we don't know what there is anymore.
Salt Lake City.
Everything.
That's
right,
where they were pointed to.
Right. But
it's
just, that's an idea of like, it's the idea of Salt Lake City is an abstract though, because we don't know that that's actually, because right now I haven't played it. I don't know if
you don't know. I know.
Right. So the abstract of wherever there is, and it's Salt Lake City is. I think there's going to be a spot where she's put in a spot of peril, and Joel has to make a decision, and that's our cliffhanger. That's what I think is, and I don't think that's. And I'm being very obtuse. I'm a big old triangle here, just saying she's in peril.
Scalene.
Yeah. I'm as obtuse as you can be, and I am just saying she's in peril. Joel has to make a decision, and that's the cliffhanger we're left on. I don't know what gets us there. I don't know anything else that happens, but she's in peril. Joel has to figure stuff out. Joel, do we even really know? I mean, like, he's not 100%. He just got stabbed, man. You got fucking dart in your neck. So it's that kind of thing where it's, I don't know.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think that's what makes a show good.
There's never been like a definitive answer as far as what the time frames are, because he does seem to be kind of up and at 'em pretty quick.
Yeah.
But there's no idea of like how long, and then they go back and they kind of correct a little bit of that with the Left Behind DLC, where it's like, oh, well, she found some medicine for him and was, but they cut that out of the show. But I think that the ending will leave you shocked, possibly speechless, or you may just utter a single word. Fuck.
I've never been left speechless in my life.
Well, that's fair. This is you we're talking. Well, this is you we're talking about. That's true.
I
That's
am
true.
one person that I can't be left speechless. If anything, I'm left speechful.
That's what she said.
That's probably.
I don't know if that correlates, but close enough.
Yeah, I would love to be left speechless. I like to see what would happen without speech.
If Gregory T. Filson was left speechless, it would be like, I think the universe would implode upon itself and reality would collapse and we would all enter a stage of perpetual madness.
I feel like Florence Pugh would have to be involved.
She wouldn't.
I'm just saying, for that to happen, for me to be left speechless, Florence Pugh would have to be involved. And so
that seems vaguely inappropriate, Greg.
I'm just saying. Doesn't have to be. I'm just saying she's involved.
Guess we'll find out.
I hope
Guess we'll find out in 6 scant days.
Wait, you know something? She's going to be here in 6 scant days?
No, you
the
creeper.
Show. I see.
Oh my goodness. Huh?
It's like, if you knew something about her, I mean.
I'm sorry. Let me ask you a question. Do you have to go to the state police barracks with any level of regularity just to let them know about where your whereabouts are?
Florence Pugh's like 26.
I just in general.
No, I don't. I'm very much in the. If anything, I'm scared of everything. So I would not. I would tell them just to be like, "Hey, I'm here because somebody might try to kill me for some reason. I don't know why." And they'd be like, "Why?" I go, "Because I don't know. Because I'm scared of literally everything." So yeah. I'm the person that gets the registration. Like they send it to you in the mail, and I'm like, I just pay for it. I'm like, give me it now, and then sign me up for everything. Like I don't want to get pulled over for like registration on my license.
Oh,
and that kind of thing.
That registration. Never mind. I thought you were going somewhere else with that. All right. No. Let's
like I'm scared of everything.
Let's move on. It's getting weird. Let's just move on.
Car registration.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
Sure is, Mandalorian fans. This is the way to episode 2, season 3 of the Mandalorian review. I apologize. I'm experiencing a little bit of throat discomfort today.
So she said.
I don't know that she did. In fact. Okay, chapter
18.
Yeah. Chapter 18. I'm like, well, no, like in my head, I'm like trying to do the math. I'm pretty sure this is chapter 18, but that doesn't make sense. I'm a little off kilter.
It's okay.
Today, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and Friday are probably the 4 most stressful days of my month. And after that, it's pretty much smooth sailing until this time of the month next month. So it's kind of my time of the month.
That's what she said.
Fair enough.
So the Mandalorian chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore. Din Djarin had a rough day. But now listen, I know people aren't too smart. This is going to be broken down into 2 segments, a spoiler-free segment, just our general thoughts. And then there's actually a timestamp in the description that says when spoilers begin. So if you want to skip to spoilers, go to that timestamp. If you would like to hear spoiler-free thoughts, continue to listen. Greg, chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore, Spoiler-free thoughts.
Well, free. I mean, it was so sick when Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker just had that battle
Ugh.
right in the middle. No. Okay, so
You're thinking of
I
Return of the Jedi.
uh
Could be.
no, I really like this episode. It was almost weird that this show and The Last of Us come out like almost parallel. I mean, not exactly parallel, but almost parallel. Where Pedro Pascal is the main the main badass, and then the little person is there. We're not sure how they can defend themselves, and then we get another side of things. And I thought that was, for this episode, very, very cool. Plus, we got to see some new things. We got Amy Sedaris just being Amy Sedaris, and I love her in every single episode of this. She's the mechanic. And at the beginning, I love her. I just love it, Amy Sedaris. So I like all that. Was very good. I thought it was just. I feel like this season, at least through the first 2 episodes, is more of like a setup kind of thing than anything. But there was a ton of action. But this is all set up to him becoming, back to being an actual Mandalorian. And so for me, this episode was a great balance of the trip continues and we're setting things up, but we do get to see some new things from Grogu. And we get to see some creatures that aren't necessarily the creatures we're accustomed to. So I mean, it's so weird because we go from The Last of Us to this, and it's just 2 completely different shows. It's not like I'm going to say The Last of Us is like, oh my God, it's just 2 different things. It's, it's sci-fi compared to based off of a video game. Well,
Also
it's not
sci-fi.
sci-fi. It's like it's more like it's more literary sci-fi, and then this is more of like straight
not
sci-fi. This is more straight sci-fi, space and all that stuff. I mean, because The Last of Us is more of just. I mean, The Last of Us is more just Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah.
And then this is, pick your favorite, sci-fi, Philip K. Dick. You do, something like that. You could just be like, it's something very sci-fi, very not at all realistic to The Last of Us. Rare, but seems somewhat believable thing. So for me, I mean, I like the way this show looks. I also like that this, so far through 2 episodes, not a wasted minute based on the episodes aren't that long, but also it feels like everything has something to do with something else. And that's refreshing to see from shows.
So this episode, as you mentioned, Amy Sedaris is Peli Motto, Pedro Pascal obviously is Din Djarin the Mandalorian, Katie Sackhoff, Bo-Katan Kryze, Jon Favreau wrote, directed by Rachel Morrison. I don't really think this is a story spoiler per se, but I saw a lot of reviews saying that how dark the episode was took away from kind of the impact of the episode. Did you have any issues with, being able to see the action, being able to just
like the lighting of this?
The lighting, yeah. I'll give you a headline from one of the reviews. The Return of Mandalore is ruined by terrible lighting.
No. And I mean, my TV is like 6 years old, and it picked this up just fine. I mean, I had no issues with that. I could see everything fine. That's weird. I did not have any issues with that. So that's very odd to me.
Yeah, I think
I guess don't watch it on your laptop. I don't know what to tell people on that end. Get a TV, you scumbags.
Well, this was a pretty big website's review. I'm not going to say which one, but just kind of glancing at the rest of it, skimming it, I kind of feel like the reviewer just completely missed the episode. Like just missed the mark on the episode. They argued that the the cinematographer or the director Rachel Morrison, who was a cinematographer for Black Panther, tried to make this a horror vibe. And I guess you could kind of say that they're going through places kind of dilapidated, but I don't know that that's really what they were going for. And I, having seen that kind of ahead of time, not really seeing any details, but seeing that particular complaint ahead of time, I also did not have any issues watching the show
Like, wow.
based on the lighting of the episode. I'm not as high on this episode as you are. I think that there are certain things that I outright didn't like. For one, the character of Palo Motto, who Amy Sedaris, is that? Yeah. Not a fan. I find that character to be.
Oh, you don't like her? I like her a lot.
Exceptionally annoying. I find that character.
Well, I think that's the idea of it. I think that's the idea.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though, is that I don't know that I disagree with you that the idea of the character is to be annoying, because anytime that there's been a character in a Star Wars property, regardless, that is annoying, it's a problem. I'm going to cite specifically Jar Jar Binks, obviously, but even Jake Lloyd's take on a very young Anakin Skywalker was annoying because of how over exuberant he was. But this isn't a Phantom Menace review, it's a Mandalorian review. So I don't particularly like that character. I find her to be grating. And then there are some other things that I actually kind of like noticed for the first time while I'm watching this particular episode, and I feel like there are maybe some cracks in the Beskar armor a little bit. And that's just kind of where I sit from the standpoint of this episode. But we can, as you are prepared, we can get into spoilers. There will be a spoiler notification. And there will also be a timestamp in the description for when that starts.
Let's do it.
See how there was a loud klaxon there sound to denote spoilers are incoming. I was not a big fan of Grogu doing flips.
That was wild.
Throughout the episode. Like the first time I was like, oh, that looks very unnatural because this is an animatronic puppet. And then when it kept happening, I was kind of dumbfounded, honestly, and again, I would think, I'm going to move my computer here slightly. I would think that lessons of the past would have been learned a little bit with this, because I remember seeing Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones? Is that? Yeah, Attack of the Clones. And thinking, oh man, it's so cool watching Yoda flip around and do lightsaber stuff. And then like years later, when I'm adult, I'm like, maybe not. And so to kind of see that, I don't know, I was like really taken aback by that. Like, oh, he can just do like somersaults now, So I was a bit flummoxed by that. I'm going to say where I think that there's maybe some cracks in the armor. As I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself, Din Djarin is constantly talking to Grogu. Grogu is a toddler. We don't really know, age of that species, 50 years, 60 years, however,
right.
55 at this point. We know Yoda dies. He's older than 700 or whatever, but what's the lifespan? How do we correlate? And he's saying it's exposition for the audience. really. It's like, okay, we're gonna have him talk to Grogu over here, but really what it is it's exposition for the audience. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, could they have made a better show? This is going to be a hot take. This is going to be boiling. Surface of the Sun take. Could they have made a better show dramatically without Baby Yoda, Grogu? And I say this because when they're on these missions together, he never stops talking. And it's basically he's functioning as the narrator.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I'm starting to like think a little bit deeper, like what if, because we always say less is more a lot of times. And now I wonder, like, could that be the case with this? Where what if he was just striding into, we're in spoilers. Yeah. Striding into the mines of Mandalore. It's completely dilapidated. And the tension is so thick you can cut it with a knife because it's silent instead of him constantly narrating what's going on to this kid who we all think's cute and we all love him. And, you know, I forgot to bring him out. He's on my shelf over there somewhere, but I'm starting to think, like, how long does this go on? I think that they maybe could have made a better. I think they could have made a compelling show by sidelining Grogu.
I think
with Luke for longer, maybe, and allowing
the
Mandalorian to complete this quest. Allowing the Mandalorian to complete this quest on his own.
I don't think you're wrong on saying, could this be a better show? Once you introduce a character like this that is loved by all,
Many.
but especially children.
Kids, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're selling toys.
You have to think like that. You have to keep kids involved. And it's like you said, that scene without Grogu where it's the silence, that's awesome to adults. Kids are going to be like, what? Like, they're going to be constantly be like, where is, baby, where's Grogu? Like, that kind of thing. So you have to think on that end of the spectrum too, of like, this still is the selling toys. This is still the idea of those things. So like, I don't necessarily disagree. Like, is it a better show? I don't know. I mean, that's the other thing too. We don't really know. The show's still to be very good. I think there is that idea too. It's like when you go back and you look at Andor, which isn't a very adult show, nobody watched it.
I don't know that nobody watched it.
Well, what I mean, though, compared to other things, it was not a show that got good ratings, just based on other Star Wars things. And it was just one of those things, like, it was critically, people loved it. It was one of those things, but just didn't have the ratings that other things have had. And so Andor's awesome, but it is definitely geared towards people. I would say it's geared towards people that are our age. I don't think it's geared towards people that are, at Gen Z. I don't even think it's that. I think it's millennials and older is what Andor is geared towards. It's almost like this is like one for them, Mandalorian, and the Andor series is one for us. That kind of idea of like the band puts out a total pop album meant to have hits, and they're like, all right, we're going to do this experimental album that like the real guys will know, the real fans will understand. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. I'm not saying it's any better or worse. I mean, I just think it's one of those things where once you've introduced somebody like Grogu, to step away from him will impact the show in different ways.
I'm just looking, just by comparison, at an article with some Nielsen ratings for Andor, and it not the success that Star Wars excuse me is maybe known for, but it was still in the top 10 most streamed episode, like, during its run.
But I remember us talking about it not having the
yeah, sure. A lot of
that's...
people were not talking about it. Yeah. I guess my thing is, I think that this year in particular, we have well, not this year, but because it's March, but in the last 12 months, we have watched a lot more content that has been specifically geared towards adults, going the whole
Right.
way back to We Own the City, Under the Banner of Heaven, House of the Dragon, The Last of Us, Andor. And I think that maybe at this point, I'm just looking for something that is maybe a little bit more adult. And it's kind of, as a Star Wars fan, it's kind of hard to reconcile that, because at the end of the day, Star Wars is for kids. I mean, the original 3 movies are PG, right?
Right.
So, and you have characters like R2D2 and C3PO and the Ewoks and the Wookiees and Jar Jar and, all these different characters that are definitely geared towards kids. But I think that maybe what happened was that Andor showed the possibilities of what an adult-oriented Star Wars could be. And I find that prospect to be very tantalizing, versus here's a puppet doing flips. And so I think that one thing that the first episode did was really reintroduce that kind of space meets spaghetti Western vibe that the original season was going for. And we talked about that in our review of that episode. I think reestablishing that was a good idea. And I think that the task in front of them at this point is going to be to kind of balance that with having these moments that are more geared towards kids. With all that being said, that kind of gets away from this individual episode as a whole. Din Djarin had a bad day. He gets attacked by these little gremlin goblin things. I would add, goblin, we know the goblins are not real, but this is Star Wars, and it is therefore kind of a science fiction fantasy tale. There weren't really goblins. They kind of reminded me of the snow creature on Hoth and Empire, just miniaturized. And then he gets swallowed up by this crab droid thing. And then at the end, he gets in the water, gets attacked by this giant beast who, as she's reading the legend, Bo-Katan's reading the legend of why the skull of this beast was adopted as the sigil of Mandalore. Like, there it is in the water. Greater concerns aside with the show, I'm very interested to see where this goes next. And I was kind of under the impression after the first episode that this quest of I have to bathe in the living waters of the mines of Mandalore was going to be like half the season. And it's episode 2 and he's already bathed in the living waters of the mind of Mandalore. So I'm kind of at a loss. I think that they've historically with the Mandalorian and other Star Wars shows, they do a really good job of not showing too deep into the series or too deep into the season with the different trailers. But I mean, those aspects, spoiler, now we're into spoilers, but what did you think of kind of Din Djarin's no good, horrible, rotten, very bad day, and how some of the things fit in and maybe where we're going to be going from here?
I mean, I think it's just showing that thing that, as cool as he is, he's not invincible. And, that I think that's really important. This idea that he's a Mandalorian, but only at this point by his own idea and not truly the idea of Mandor. And I thought that was really important. I also thought it was important that he shows the part where he's, in his vessel and he's like, hey, that's where I grew up. I actually didn't live here.
Right.
And all those little things I think are super important. And the idea that he's still trying to like find himself. It sounds funny. And I looked at this episode as almost like sort of or I'm looking at this season, but starting with maybe this episode more than anything is like a coming of age storyline, which I'm a sucker for a coming of age, but it's like that finding yourself kind of thing. And it's like he needs to reestablish himself.
Sorry, a little late on
coming
that.
of age story of
That's
like,
what she said.
I need to figure out what I'm actually doing. He's lost. He is actually lost right now. And as you know, whatever you say with like him, you know, with Grogu flipping around, there is that serious storyline of that where he doesn't have a place. Honestly, right now, Din Djarin doesn't have a place, and now he's trying to find that. And I think that's really important. So on that storyline, it was this idea that, you know, he gets caught, he gets beat up, he is, you know, he's in a bad place. He sort of gets saved, or he gets saved, but then it's like, oh, this is just going to continue it. So I can almost look at this as him almost going through like a Pac-Man-esque game or something where he has to keep beating levels to get to where he needs to actually go. And I mean in a positive way, not just streamline, but he's going to earn his way to becoming an actual Mandalorian.
I'm curious about a few things that were shown off or talked about in this episode. Number one is he visits Palo Motto to see if he can get a memory chip for the IG droid. She just doesn't have one, and the Jawas don't have one. So she gives him this bumbling R5 unit, and then he goes anyway. So I'm curious if they're going to circle back to the IG unit, number one. And two, if they're not, that was kind of a waste of about half an episode, of a short episode, no less. So I'm curious to see how they circle back to that. The other thing is that, kind of reading into this a little bit more deeply, would you say that the crab droid that was then thing pops out of it, it's got like its long staff situation going on, when it's has him in its claws, this droid thing disarms Mando, throws the gun on the ground, throws the Darksaber on the ground. At that point, does that mean that droid is the true wielder of the Darksaber because it defeated him in combat, which is how the Darksaber has to change hands, which would then mean that Bo-Katan is now the true wielder of the Darksaber, which is what she wanted all along. But she defeated that droid in combat. And so now the question becomes, because I thought they show him very deliberately clipping it back onto himself after that battle, after he comes to, after she saves him. I thought when they were headed down to the waters that she was going to attack him for the Darksaber.
Yeah, right.
I thought that that's kind of where that was heading, but I'm interested to see if that's how that whole thing gets interpreted. And I'm interested to see, because like you said, he is trying to find himself. He's trying to earn back being, you know, part of the creed of Mandalorian, but he did what was required. And so now there's 6 more episodes. So what does that mean? Where do we go from here? He does have to find his place, but I felt like this whole season was going to be about that. And this kind of turns my expectations on their head a little bit, because now I feel like there's not a whole bunch of unexplored tethers other than the Darksaber. We know Moff Gideon's floating around, and then uniting all the scattered remnants of Mandalore. And so, I mean, I think that the Darksaber and Moff Gideon kind of go together. And also his relationship with Bo-Katan and reuniting all of the disparate parts of this scattered civilization are also kind of go together. And I feel like Katie Sackhoff's character, Bo-Katan Kryze, is kind of the keystone piece of this season at this point.
Right. No, I mean, I feel like there could be a thing where he has it, but if he's not the true wielder of this, like it starts to make you evil, right? I mean, that's like the idea of this is like it starts to take away
I don't
stuff
think
from
that
you, right?
that's-
I feel like that's the background with. I thought that was the background of the. If you're not the true wielder, it like does stuff to you. I thought that was the idea behind this. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I definitely thought there was some kind of. I thought there was like a negative impact to it if you have it, but you aren't actually the true wielder of it. But what I do think is if he isn't, there is going to be some sort of, whether or not it does anything to you or not, there is some sort of impact behind that. And I think the idea that it stood out so much in this episode, I mean, it's obviously very highlighted whenever it's being used, but I think that is definitely important, of the idea that it can be, this may be where more of the season's going, of like, who is the true wielder of this? And what does that actually mean?
Well, whoever wields the Darksaber is the ruler of Mandalore.
Right. But I thought it is, if you don't actually earn it, I felt like there was a negative impact.
I'm looking, I'm on I'm on the
I was
Star
reading
Wars,
something that was like very deep and not
I'm on the Star Wars
fan theories.
I'm on the Star Wars Wikipedia, also known as Wookieepedia.
Nice.
I'm trying to see.
I definitely remember reading this, but like I mean, like I said, it could have been something where it was fan theory about it, that if you're not the true wielder but you own it, it takes away, you're not as powerful, something like that. I could be wrong, but either way, I think whether that's right or wrong, I think there is the idea that this is the most important thing about it, is that whoever has it is really going to be the key in her battle with him. I mean, there was that thing too, whenever Grogu pulled in, parked down the ship, and she was like, let's end this guy. And then it wasn't Din Djarin, and that she was like, oh, okay, and now I gotta hunt him down. So it could be a tit-a-tat between the two of them for the rest of the season. Or, I mean, like you said, we thought it was going to be a season of this, and it turned into 2 episodes. I mean, there is something to be said about also just not knowing what a season will be about.
So, okay, this is what the armor says to Din Djarin. It is said, quote, "It is said one warrior will defeat 20 and the multitudes will fall before it. If, however, it is not won in combat and falls into the hands of the undeserving, it will be a curse unto the nation. Mandalore will be laid to waste and its people scattered to the 4 winds."
I knew it was something negative. I just couldn't remember exactly, but yeah.
I mean, that's kind of vague.
Right. But it is negative.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
They like curses.
Yeah, they're kind of the Mandalorians themselves are a bit of a mysterious culture. I wonder, I would be curious to maybe
they like tarot
dig
cards.
into what the inspiration for is.
That would be interesting. The Mandalorian.
Not that character himself, the character of Din Djarin the Mandalorian. Vikings, ancient Greece, Norse, and Celtic inspirations, which that
makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of that makes sense. For sex of the Mandalorian, sex, SECTS, not the other thing. Anyway. Yeah, I still, not to speak too negatively or about this, because I thought it was a fine episode. I think it was, it felt like maybe a 7 to me. And maybe that's part of the disappointment, is you're going back to Mandalore for the first time in this series, and it's such an important place of this culture and its history. And it was kind of I don't want to say it was a letdown, but it wasn't like, oh shit, here we go.
Right.
And expectations sometimes can steal away some of the joy found within. But
Sure.
I thought it was a fine episode. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I'm viewing this through different colored lenses than I had before Andor. So there's that. But anyway, episode 3 of the season next week. Any thoughts, predictions, what have you?
Wow. Like you said, this kind of threw me off a little bit. Where thoughts and predictions. I mean, I obviously think that we're going to see more of Grogu's powers being to use, not necessarily flipping around, but he does. Yeah, he is definitely at least somewhat with the Force now and has those powers. So I think we'll see more of that. I mean, I do think it is going to be a constant. I think we're going to see Din Djarin struggling a lot more than we have in the past with things. And I don't necessarily mean just physically. I think there could be a lot of like emotional, physical struggles that he has to go through the rest of the way.
Real fast, quick, fast, in a hurry. Media recommendations.
I have just a couple. Let me see. I'm still reading The Shards. Like I said, it's a big book, so Bret Easton Ellis. Really, I love it. I love it more and more. Basketball, NCAA championships coming up next week, but we got the conference tourneys. That's always fun. And then just a few movies. This Is Where I Leave You. Escape from New York, which is from the 80s and is amazing.
Classic.
Side Effects. Yeah, Insomnia and Drumline.
Insomnia,
Drumline. Yeah, so a bunch of movies.
Chris Nolan movie.
Yeah,
Insomnia.
It's great. Yeah, I actually the first time I'd ever seen it, which is weird because I thought,
wow.
catch Moach. Yeah, everything. I think I've seen
What
every
did
Chris Nolan movie.
what did you watch it on? What was that on?
Prime?
Is it on Prime?
I think it's on Prime.
Okay, because I'd like to.
It's a big Prime. It was a big Prime week for us. Prime is sneaky good. It has a lot of like sneaky movies. Prime.
Yeah, and it's got like some of the shows are good. I mean, The Boys is excellent, but
Party Down is on Hulu. It was on Stars like the first 2 seasons, like more than a decade ago. And then now there's a new 3rd season, but we're just binging the first 2 seasons right now. Incredible. Adam Scott, Ken Marino, among others. Amazingly, it's so funny. So Party Down is too.
My media recommendations are The Last of Us.
Sure.
Staying hydrated and getting plenty of rest.
Hell yeah.
And you can check us out on our social medias at BXG Productions on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/BXG Productions. You can check out our YouTube reviews, which, if they are segmented, there's actually a timestamp.
I need to get one of those bar sold triggered shirts.
Hey man, rise and grind. In the description, there's actually a timestamp. So, check that out if you're fucking stupid, I guess. Otherwise, listen to us on all your podcast networks. Check out our YouTube channel. Enjoy the content. Leave kind comments, like, subscribe, share. Reviews helpful comments, and sharing is how we spread. So otherwise, enjoy the rest of your